Hello and welcome. My name is Michael Brown. I'm a CMA and a CPA with BecK Professional Education, and it's my great pleasure to welcome you to your CMA exam review course. Now, the purpose of this video is twofold. One, we're going to go through really the highlights or key learnings about the CMA exam as a whole, and then we'll do a little bit deeper dive into part one of the two parts of the CMA exam. To start with, it's important to know where you can find more detailed information than what we're presenting here, as this video is intended to be a high-level overview. And an excellent document that I would recommend you download and keep on your desktop is the CMA Handbook. That's freely available from the IMA's website if you haven't already downloaded it at this point. But what I want to do now is cover some key points related to the process of obtaining your CMA credential. And that begins with eligibility. So in order to be eligible to sit for the exam, to even register to take one of the parts of the exam, you first must be an IMA member. So member of the Institute of Management Accountants in good standing. Second, you have to have paid the overall CMA entrance fee. And third, you have to have met the educational qualifications. Now, there's two main ways to do that. One is you can have an appropriate bachelor's degree from an accredited institution, and or you could have a professional certification that would also meet that overall educational requirement. Once you're eligible as a candidate, you then can begin working towards earning the certificate. So how does that happen? Well, first off, you have to have obtained relevant working experience. In this case, that's 2 continuous years. You have to have paid the individual examination fees. There's a Part 1 and a Part 2 exam, and there's a Part 1 and a Part 2 fee. And you have to have passed the 2 parts of the exam within a 3-year time limit. You also have to adhere to and basically pledge to follow the IMA Statement of Ethical Professional Practice. Do all of those things, and you get to put the letters CMA after your name. So let's talk a little bit more overall about the exam. Now, one of the good things here is that regardless of which part of the exam we're talking about, Part 1 or Part 2, the format is identical. Here's what you need to know. First off, you have a 4-hour time limit to complete the entire exam, which comes in 2 stages. The first stage is multiple choice. First rule, you have a maximum of 3 hours to complete the multiple choice questions. Now, the idea here is if you use all 3, well then, since it's a 4-hour exam, that would leave you 1 hour for the second stage. But if you finish the multiple choice in less than 3 hours, whatever time remains of the total 4, you then get to use for the second stage essays. So you could use 2 hours and then have 2 hours left. Those 100 multiple choice questions have 2 important things about them. First, they represent 3/4 of your final score. And second, there is a gatekeep after that first section. If you don't at least get half of those multiple choice questions correct, then your exam will end. You will not even see the second section. But as long as you have gotten half of them right or better, you then can complete the 2 30-minute essays. And typically, each of those essays is going to have 5 or 6 parts that you're going to respond to. In the aggregate, those essays represent the other 25% of your score. Now, when can you sit? How can you sit? How about some of those questions? Well, first off, Prometric is the company that handles administration of the exam through its Prometric testing centers. And you can see a bit more about this on Prometric's website. Next, the exam is not given year-round. Instead, it's given in specific testing windows, basically 2 months on and then 2 months off. So as you can see here, the exam is given during the months of January and February, but then not given in March and April. Then it is given in May and June, and so forth. Note that if you want to sign up for a given window, that window's registration period closes basically at the halfway mark of the second month. So if we're talking about January and February, if you don't register by February 15th, then you cannot take the exam in that window. Now, once you have registered in a window, you must sit for the exam in that window. Now, if you want to make a change to your appointment, let's say you've scheduled the exam on a given date, given time, and a conflict comes up and you would like to reschedule, you can certainly do that with certain limitations. One, if you do it within 30 days, you're going to be assessed a rescheduling fee. But if you try to cancel the exam outright less than 72 hours before you take it, you would then forfeit your examination fees. On exam day, what are you bringing with you when you go to your Prometric Center where you've registered to take the exam? First, plan to arrive early. The recommendation is at least 30 minutes prior. Second, you're going to need to bring valid identification. Now that can be just a passport, or it could be 2 forms of signed identification, one of which at least has to have a picture, or it could be a national country identification card plus 1 form of signed identification. Again, additional details provided in the handbook. You may also bring an approved calculator. There's a very specific list, but the kind of quick summary is either a Texas Instruments BA2 Plus, or there are a few specific models of Hewlett-Packard that are also available. Prometric will take care of scratch paper and a pen or pencil. Are you going to get the score at that moment in time? No. Although the exam will make a raw assessment of your multiple choice, obviously the essays are a little bit more involved, so you will receive your scores later. Ultimately, scores are converted to a scale from 0 to 500. Passing is a 360 on that 500-point scale. Typically, it's about a 6-week gap between when you sit for the exam and when you receive your scores. Now, if you don't achieve that mark of 360 or better, you will get a performance report about 2 weeks after that will summarize some information, hopefully to give you some additional feedback that you can use to reset and re-prepare for the part you failed. Note, you cannot take the same part twice within the same 2-month window. Okay. With that being said, let's talk in a little bit more detail about Part 1. Now, they title Part 1 Financial Planning, Performance, and Analytics. Now, just as we talked about with the exam summary, that's governed by the candidate handbook. Well, when we talk about exactly what's on the exam, or in other words, if you said, hey, Becker, how do you know what's on the CMA exam? How do you know what subject matter is testable? Well, you can look at the same document that we do. It's what's called the Learning Outcomes Statements, and it's exactly that. It is a detailed description of what's within the scope of each of the 2 parts of the exam. When we look at Part 1, there are 6 different elements, and you can see them here, and they're weighting. They're all, I like to say, relatively equal. It's not perfect. There are 2 that are slightly heavier weighted, but gives you a good idea. These include external financial reporting decisions, cost management, internal controls, and technology and analytics. Each of those are 15%, and then planning, budgeting, forecasting, and performance management, each of those counting for 20%. On the next few slides, we'll go through in a little bit more depth what is included under each of those broad umbrella sections, starting with what's called Unit 1A. So we can kind of identify each of these major areas by 1A, and if we were talking about Part 2, we'd be starting with 2A. So this is external financial reporting decisions, representing 15%. Covered here, well, really it's a lot of accounting, or financial accounting, or financial reporting. So we're talking about the core financial statements. We're talking about specific issues about assets and liabilities, including receivables, inventory, liabilities, equity. Also rolled in here some special considerations, or really some niche accounting topics like taxes and leases, as well as revenue recognition. Now, in our course, we don't cover the 6 areas in that order. So we don't go from 1A to 1F. And there's reasons behind that in terms of what we believe is the best way to present the material in the right sequence as from a teaching and review standpoint. So the next unit for us is actually covering 1D, and that's cost management. And there we cover the concepts of measuring costs, some of the different costing systems, handling overhead. We'll also talk about some processes like supply chain management and business process improvement. Then we'll backtrack to 1B. That's our 3rd unit. And that's where we talk about strategic planning, the concepts surrounding the budgeting and budgeting process, different techniques used for forecasting, different methodologies used for budgeting, how you build out an annual profit plan and the schedules that would ultimately support that profit plan, as well as overall top-level planning and analysis. Then in our 4th unit, we cover 1C, that's performance management. That's where we cover cost and variance measures, as well as issues like responsibility centers, the interesting issues of transfer pricing, and other ways to measure performance. Our fifth unit covers internal control, which is delving a little bit into what you might consider auditing. Here we'll cover governance, risk, compliance, as well as system controls and system security. And then finally, in Unit 6, we'll cover 1F. That includes information systems, governance around data, how we have seen technology enable the transformation of finance processes and finance functions, as well as data analytics. So that's the overview. I hope that was helpful to kind of set the stage for what you're entering into as you begin part 1 of your preparation for the exam. And don't worry, you'll see me again. But for right now, I'll say good luck. We're here to help, and let's get started. Thanks.